Hi guys, we are going to do Spooky Animations by Llama Arts. I hope you subscribe to his channel. And yeah, just do it. Or I'm probably not gonna post any more of these. Don't watch this at night like I am, or you'll have straight up nightmares. These are scary.
Me and my friend Seth got into this app, which showed you ghosts. We'd go out ghost hunting, but nothing much would happen. Sometimes a dot would appear on one of our phones, and it would say random words. We would ask, "How did you die?" Stuff like that. And sometimes the answers lined up, but it was mostly random. One night, around 2 a.m., Seth suggested going to the cemetery to see if the app picked anything up. I was hesitant, but I nervously agreed. We started making our way through the neighborhood towards the cemetery. It was weird as the streets are normally lined with cars, but they were empty on this night. We walked down the middle of the road with the app running, but it wasn't picking anything up. We finally made it to the cemetery, which was a small, family-owned one where they only buried their own. Seth went up to the gate and started shouting, hoping to get a response to the app. Nothing happened. I was standing in the road, feeling unsettled, when Seth starts yelling, "Is that all you got?" I told him to stop disrespecting the dead and we should leave. He tried being funny, saying, "Oh, I'll make them show up." He jumped the gate and started stomping on the graves while screaming, "Come on, show us something." All of a sudden, our phones said something at the same time. I looked down at my phone and it was there. We both just stood there, looking at each other when 10 or so red dots appeared on the radar. And it said it again. When I looked back up from my phone, Seth was next to me. I said, "We got to go." As soon as I said that, we could hear the street lights turning off one by one from the top of the street, getting closer to us. We took off running as fast as we could. We got about halfway into the neighborhood before running out of breath and having to stop. I felt like I was going to throw up from being scared and winded. Then I heard my phone say something. It was muffled, but I knew what it said. Being too scared to look at my phone, I looked at Seth, who looked terrified. He nodded at me to get my phone out, so I slowly pulled it out, and it said my name across the top. I turned my phone off and said, "Screw this, I'm done." We made our way back to my house and had a cigarette to calm down. We were talking about what just happened.
Cigarette man.
Almost not believing.
Guys, don't smoke. It'll end up really bad. Trust me, I don't know.
This time it was my sister's name. We just stood there, frozen, not saying a word. Went
His
off again.
sister?
Said my brother's name.
Well, man, how old you be? Wait, I mean, how old your sister be? If you guys are the same age. No. Is she like... how old am I? 11? Is she 11?
I took my phone out, turned it on, and deleted the app. I asked Seth to stay the night, but he refused. I can't blame him. When I finally got to sleep that night, I dreamt a muffled voice repeating a word over and over. I started to wake up and the words became clearer. My phone was off, with the battery out.
Man, a phone battery don't... Damn ads!
But when I turned it over, it was lit up with the app running.
Oh, for a second I thought the phone...
Still repeating.
Afraid, 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 afraid.
I woke up the next morning and went to the bathroom. razor-thin cut from my left shoulder to my right hip. I don't know what happened that night, and nothing has happened to me since. Needless to say, I don't mess with that kind of stuff anymore.
Damn. And we still got a whole thing for this is from 2018 to 2019, but we're in 2020. Oh shit. I dropped my phone.
Over the weekend, about 15 coworkers and myself had our company trip to the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, known for being Stephen King's inspiration for The Shining. We took an 8 p.m. ghost tour where we joined about 15 other people to get guided around the property and told stories.
Bruh. That thing Matt Smith always says. White people always be investigating. Fuck white people.
It's about its history and creepy things that are said to have happened. We were told to take a lot of pictures, sure to try and capture orbs or ghosts. Many green orbs were caught in pictures, but I don't think anything is as creepy as this photo taken by my coworker. A little girl in a hot pink dress who was definitely not on our tour. And apparently, years ago, a young girl who was 12 to 13 by the name of Lucy was squatting in the basement of the concert hall, which is where this photo was taken. And she was discovered upon plans to begin some construction. She was forced to leave, and the night got below freezing. So she froze to death. Everyone on my tour has vouched that this girl was not on our tour. I mean, who wouldn't remember someone wearing hot pink? The man pictured is our tour guide. No one would have been in front of him. I am convinced that this is the ghost of Lucy. Just one more added note, though I doubt anyone would believe me. But there was only one time throughout the tour where I felt any strange energy or feeling. And it was right there, headed down to the basement of the concert hall.
Don't investigate. I swear to God, if he investigates, I will pop some caps. You know something?
What's that? Plain white sauce? Plain white sauce makes your teeth go grey.
This happened a few weeks ago when I was
What
walking
the
home
hell?
from school, excited that my freshman year was coming to an end.
You know something, guys?
It was a Tuesday night
Can you
when I
guys
was
make
turning
this?
in my last essay for history. I left it to the last minute, and the teacher actually made me complete it before I could go home. I hated my teacher for that. Around 8 p.m., I had finished that goddamn essay and was walking home. The rain had stopped, and there was a beautiful sunset. Suddenly, I noticed something. There was a red 2016 Toyota Camry right behind me. I got goosebumps thinking it was following me. I didn't look back.
Hey guys, I'm back. Oh shit.
There was a red 2016 Toyota Camry right behind me.
I'm just kidding, guys. I don't have one of those things. I'll come to us smoke those balls. I can just make this voice.
Direction. I wanted to go to a busy road to feel safer. Just then, the car sped up, stopping right next to me. A middle-aged man asked me where I was headed and suggested to drop me off. I said no thanks, but the man wouldn't leave and insisted. I wanted to tell the man to just fuck off, but I took off running instead. I heard a loud noise. At the same time, felt something I can only describe as a sharp vibration hitting my flesh. I fell to the ground, not knowing what happened. Out of adrenaline, I was about to get up and run again as I felt a heavy arm grab me by the mouth. Then the pain set in. I realized that I was shot. There was another man next to him that searched my pockets. He grabbed my phone and threw it on the ground as he tied my legs and taped my mouth. They quickly put me into the trunk of their car and then started driving. I could feel that we were going very fast, and I'm sure that we hadn't stopped at all for a good 30 minutes. I was feeling my blood soaking into my shirt, which scared me the most. I was certain that I was going to die. I was thinking about my
I
parents
know a
and
way to
what they
get
would
out of
feel
duct
when they
tape.
heard that I was missing.
Just get it all the duct tape
Then the
in
car
place,
came to a
and
stop.
then
By some
press
miracle,
the
I heard a
time.
police officer asking for IDs and driver's licenses. I wanted to yell for help, but nothing came out. Just then, I heard 3 to 4 gunshots. I heard another cop yelling, "Man down! Man down! Shots fired!" I was begging the cop to find me. Then I heard the cop searching the car. I was feeling joy as my pain was growing worse. Seconds felt like hours. The officer then opened the car's trunk and suddenly started firing at me out of a fight or flight response. Thankfully, the bullets missed. The officer quickly caught up to the fact that I was kidnapped and injured. He called for backup immediately, and it arrived in minutes. They placed the injured officer onto a gurney and drove off in an ambulance. Finally, when the scene was safe, they called another ambulance for me. I woke up in the hospital. The news media was everywhere. I was fine after a few days, but later learned that the officer that was shot didn't make it. I don't know if those men are still alive or rotting away in a prison for killing an officer.
No.
You think your parents are gonna keep...
I don't want to know what would have happened if those officers hadn't stopped the car.
I'll hurt ads. I'll hurt them. I hate ads. I hate them. A bus stop horror story.
This happened when I was 17 years old. I would go to the
After
gym
this
3 to 4
video, I'm
times
gonna
a
make a
week and ride the
gaming
bus home.
video.
It was a Sunday and I had just missed my bus, so I had to wait longer for another one. I would have called my parents, but they were out for the evening, and taxis charged more, so I decided to sit and wait in the bus shelter. It was a cold night, and snow had just started peppering the ground. My bus was taking longer than usual, so I got my phone out and listened to some music. Almost an hour had passed. It was freezing and I hadn't seen anyone at all. That was until I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. It was a creepy guy dressed in thick layers of clothing, walking slowly towards me. I knew staring at him would draw more attention, so I just focused on my phone. He sat down at the other end of the shelter and just stared at me. There was something off about him. He seemed like he was either drunk or on drugs. He then asked, "When is the bus due?" I took out my earphones and said, "I think it's delayed because of the snow." He stared at me for a while, then started mumbling to himself. He was really starting to creep me out, so I pretended to be on my phone. After a couple of minutes, I took another look. He moved closer to me. I looked away for a second, then heard the sound of him sliding even closer. I turned to him and said, "You okay there?" He stared at me with glossy eyes, lifted his arm, and leaned towards me. Immediately, I grabbed my bag and ran as he fell to the ground. I ran down the road, trying my hardest not to look back. I kept going until I got to the next bus stop. I turned around to check to see if he was there. He was gone, so I went to sit down. Feeling relieved, I rested my head on the back of the glass and waited for the bus. I jolted and turned around to see the same guy staring at me through the glass. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Then he started walking around the shelter towards me. "I'm warning you, stay back!" I yelled in panic as I was backing up. I wanted to run, but I left my bag in the shelter and I couldn't leave without it. Suddenly, the man leaped at me and I quickly moved out of the way. He fell to the ground face first. I froze in shock, then noticed the blood coming from his face. I tried to get a response out of him, but nothing worked. I called the police and paramedics, and they arrived shortly after. I told them what had happened, and they told me that the guy was on prescription drugs. They found a photo in his wallet of him and his son. The boy looked just like me, so we assumed he thought I was him. I later learned that he had lost his son in a custody battle and was on the rails. He was taken away for treatment. That was the last I saw of him. I got my
Dang,
driver's license shortly after.
that's not scary, that's sad.
I don't know bus since.
Bro, that's sad, not scary. I put it on my... No, where my DJ mask is? Where the hell my DJ mask?
It was November of 2006.
Oh.
I was a 16-year-old kid.
Don't pay attention to my camera.
Iowa.
Sorry, I'm making this.
Early one night because I had to work the early shift at McDonald's. As I slept, I had a dream that I was running through downtown Des Moines, but I wasn't on a jog. I was running from something. As I ran around the corner of a building, I came face to face with my pursuer. A tall man wearing a trench coat and a top hat stood in front of me. The only thing visible of his face was his eyes. They were abnormally large with black pupils, and it looked at me as if it wanted something. After what felt like hours, he reached out his bony hand, as if he wanted me to go with him. I woke up violently from my dream, and after catching my breath, I peered around my room to see if I was safe. As I stood up from my bed, I noticed that I could see my breath. Feeling confused, I checked my window. It was latched shut. I then walked over and checked my vent. I could still feel warm air coming from it. As I sat back down on my bed, I tried to figure out what exactly was going on. That's when the figure from my dream appeared at the foot of my bed. I scrambled back to my headboard. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to hide the shakiness in my voice. With the same bony finger, it pointed at me. Growing up in a religious home, I believed what I was looking at was a demon. I told the creature to leave. It just waved its finger at me. With a low voice, it spoke to me. "Never leave. Always here." The creature then screamed loudly and disappeared. A feeling of nausea came over me, and I vomited on my floor. The last thing I remember was cleaning myself up and waking up to my alarm. It's been about a month since I had seen the top hat wearing man in my bedroom. The Christmas season was in full effect. My parents weren't home because they got invited to some kind of event, so it was only me and my 3 sisters at home. I had to wake up early in the morning for work, so I decided to go to sleep. I rested my head on my pillow and closed my eyes. Not even 30 seconds passed until my sisters burst into my room and started singing obnoxious songs. This, of course, made me very angry, but I thought if I ignored them that they would leave me alone. This was not the case. As I pulled the blankets over my head, I started to feel the same cold feeling that I had in November. As the obnoxious singing subsided, I lowered the blanket below my eyes and saw the man standing in the corner of my room. In one swift motion, he charged towards me, and I blacked out. When I finally came to, I found that my sisters had locked themselves inside the bathroom. As I knocked on the door, they told me to go away. I asked them what happened, and all they could say was Mom and Dad were on their way home. I looked down and saw that my hand was slightly bloody. Holes were in the bathroom door, and a broom was sticking out of the wall. I then walked into the living room and found that there were knives stuck into the wall as well. The same wave of nausea passed over me, just like in November, and I threw up again. As I was cleaning up, my parents walked through the door. My father immediately walked over to me and gave me a good beating. Then he sent me to my room. I went to bed crying. Not from the beating. I was crying because of the confusion. I had
What
no idea what was
happened?
going on. The next morning, my sisters reluctantly sat next to me and told me what had happened. They said I got angry and chased them down and tried to hurt them. They said my eyes were red to the point where they thought I was bleeding from them. They said I sounded like a different person. In 2011, that was the last time I saw the top hat wearing man. I just moved into a new apartment, and after a long, stressful day of unpacking, I took a shower and got ready for bed. As I started to drift off, I could feel that cold feeling again.
Bruh, why does he have the
I
same
lifted my head
haircut
and
when
saw the
it's
man
been like
standing
2
in front of me.
years?
The man's eyes were red now. With a low voice, just like on that November night, it looked at me and said, "Never leave. Always here."
Damn. I hope I don't have nightmares from this shit. Nah, cause I'm gonna be
During my holiday,
watching
I spent
different
about
videos
3
that are
weeks
like
in Japan.
funny as hell. Oh, and I
arrived
got
pretty late, so I couldn't check into
2
the hotel
people you
that
should
was booked.
subscribe
So I
to.
booked the cheapest hotel that I could find nearby.
Dang Matt Smith and King
Aesthetically, it was
Crane.
quite nice, but it did have easy access to
2
the
people.
building, meaning anyone could come
Dang Matt
in
Smith and
go to any
King
room
Crane.
as they please. Plus, there was no security
They are
inside.
good YouTubers.
After arriving in my room, I ordered some food.
So
and
yeah,
watched
you
some
should go
TV.
subscribe to
I
their
was still
channel.
pretty jet lagged from the flight, so I started to get ready for bed. As I was falling asleep, I felt the urge to double check the door just to see if it was locked. I didn't think anything was going to happen, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. About 5 minutes after I checked the door, I
Who
heard
says I'd
footsteps
rather be
outside.
safe than sorry
Initially,
anymore?
I thought it was someone leaving their room, but the footsteps started to pick up speed. The sound started getting louder and louder, and I started to freak out a little. All of a sudden, the sound stopped. I looked at the light shining through the bottom of my door, and there was a shadow of a person. At first, I thought it was room service, but it was too late for that. Or maybe it was some drunk idiot who was at the wrong room. As soon as I switched my light on, the shadow disappeared. I was confused, but I reluctantly went back to bed. That's when I suddenly heard scratching coming from my door, so I immediately turned my light on and shouted, "Who's there?" After a moment of silence, I heard the footsteps slowly fade away. At this point, I was thinking it could be some kids messing around, so I got up, opened the door, and peeked my head outside. I glanced in both directions down the dark and slim hallways. That's when my heart stopped. A man emerged from the darkness and ran erratically towards me. His face was contorted as he screamed, and I could see he was holding a knife in his right hand. As he got closer, I could see him more clearly. He had disgusting long, dirty hair. His clothes were ripped, and he had cuts and bruises all over. I quickly slammed my door and pressed against it, praying that the man would just go away. After what felt like hours, I finally gathered my courage and looked through the peephole.
Who
He was
calls it a
gone.
peephole anymore?
I let out a sigh of relief and checked the peephole again. My heart started pumping faster than ever before. He was right in front of the door. He was wearing a maniacal smile on his face, and all of a sudden he raised his knife and yelled, "I'm gonna fucking kill you!" I jumped back and kept my eyes locked on the bottom of the
Profanity,
door as I backed up to my bed. I grabbed my phone and started dialing the police. As I raised the phone to my ear, I saw that the shadow was gone. When the police arrived, I had to
Maniacal,
explain
dude.
what happened, and they checked the security cameras.
What you
They
doing,
almost
dog?
immediately recognized the man.
That's my dogger. That's my dogger. Yeah.
After a
This is
long
my
night of no
channel now,
sleep,
bitch.
I finally arrived at the
That's
right
my
hotel
dogger.
that I had booked initially.
His name's Duke.
That
You
creepy
guys
guy
can
was still on my
see one
mind.
of his
I
videos.
thought the chances of him being here was slim.
Look at your,
I finally arrived at the right
get your
hotel.
brown ass
Initially
back
in
here.
Tokyo.
No.
That creepy guy was
No.
still on my
Get
mind.
back here.
I thought the
Get back
chances
here,
of
you
him being
orange
here
little
was
shit.
slim
Get back
upon
here.
unlocking my door that night.
It's hilarious. Wait, what?
At 12:05 a.m., I woke up to a big bang arrested. Let's just say I'm always going to be locking my doors from now on.
I guess my mom's seen this animation before. She gets pissed when the door's not locked. Wait, no, that's my dad.
I was 26 years old, and I was unemployed. Feeling unfulfilled by the monotony of a job life, I decided I would try my hand
I
at
watched
working
it.
from
Oh,
home. So
that's
my
someone
days and
else
nights
for you to
comprised
subscribe
me
to.
surfing the
Mess
internet for any
yourself.
jobs I could get.
Mess yourselfy.
I was a big
He's the one
procrastinator,
who
so
showed
more often
us
than not, I'd stray away and
those
waste time
like
doing other
videos
things.
like this and stuff.
One day, I came across talk about the deep web while on Reddit. I felt amused by the people talking about it, as if it was something so scary, and decided I'd look into it. It was stupid of me to go on it in the first place, but I made it even sillier by deciding to check it out late at night. It was about 2 a.m. and I came across a website where you could chat with someone anonymously. The person I got was a woman. She was in her early 20s and very pretty. She sat with her head in her hands, looking playful into the webcam while batting her eyes. I had no desire to turn my camera on and started our chat, thinking that while I didn't come across anything scary, I could befriend this pretty girl. It sounded like a better deal anyway. She told me to turn the camera on, but I ignored that request and tried to get her to talk. She finally did after some prodding, but I noticed how guarded she was. I also noticed how after every message I sent, her eyes would look off camera, either to her side or somewhere behind her computer. After a while, it started getting annoying, so I asked her if someone else was there with her.
I want to see you first.
She said. Up until now, I'd been chatting while she'd answered my questions verbally. I'm not that curious,
Don't be scared.
she said, laughing. This time looking behind the laptop again and making a face that seemed to indicate she was laughing at my expense with someone else. This is getting boring.
You do.
Just
I'm just trying to meddle with my dog, like kicking it, shoving him, like,
what else is
you
there?
know how you push something with your feet like this?
Is this a joke?
Yeah, I was doing it.
Turn it on.
Okay, I'll be leaving now.
Turn on the camera.
Her laughter was almost piercing by now. There was nothing humorous about the situation, yet she threw her head back with riotous laughter.
Ooh, that wasn't
That hadn't
pretty at
been
all.
Move the cursor over to turn the chat box off. When I saw the cursor, it jammed. The only thing that was working was the chat box, and I still had access to the keyboard.
Turn the camera on, sweetie.
Her gumdrop-filled voice was louder than before, and I moved my gaze up to see her smiling toothfully at the camera. Her face still beautiful, but the smile completely fake. My computer's crashed. I can't see the screen.
You don't
Sorry.
do that.
I lied. I didn't want her to know I had no option but to chat. Her screen flashed before going blank. There was nothing there but a black screen. I felt relieved, thinking that at least I didn't need to talk to her while I tried to figure out what happened to the screen. Just then, a chat message popped up.
Open the damn camera.
The aggressiveness in the message frightened me.
You little
Now,
prick.
the fact that I couldn't see her face while she typed this made me feel nervous. I didn't dare reply back, but then the cursor moved. I watched shell-shocked as the cursor twirled around the screen.
Open the camera now.
I still didn't make a move. There was no way anything good would be waiting for me if I did what she asked. The screen began flickering, as if a virus was causing the computer to writhe in agony.
Do you want me to find you?
My heart raced. Could it be possible she knew where I was? I started typing. Please stop bothering me.
Then turn on the fucking camera.
By this point, I thought she was some kind of sadist and got her kicks by scaring unassuming people in chat rooms. So I obliged and turned the webcam on. I saw my frightened face staring into the screen. Judging by my face, my attempts at looking tough were painfully unsuccessful. I asked around for the girl looking straight into the camera, telling her I did what she wanted and to stop hacking into my computer. There were several seconds of silence. I kept my stare directed to the little box that showed her camera feed, but it was pitch black. I motioned into the camera in confusion, feeling as if she was messing with me now. Then I saw another message.
Look here.
After a few seconds of staring at those words, I looked back at her camera, but my computer instantly malfunctioned. I received another message.
Look here. Don't look up.
The chat was filled with nonsensical gibberish. She typed with such ferocious speed, my screen whirled away with her constant messages. I couldn't understand what was going on, but I didn't look up. My patience ran thin, and I wrote back, "What is this supposed to mean?" Her response came. I read only the letters in bold and shuddered. I looked back into her webcam, and I fell back into my chair, my eyes widening. She was back there, only her face looked completely demented. She had a savage expression, devoid of emotion, but her eyes were almost popping out of their sockets, and she was huffing as if she had extreme amounts of pent-up rage. The way she looked directly into the camera made me feel she despised me with all of her being. There was no amusement there anymore. Her camera went blank.
I think I just found my new favorite bodily sound.
Look, this is funny as hell. I hate that part. Okay.
Like again. Then the chat popped up. My heart stopped again. For a split second, there had been the same blackness, only for the lights to come back on. She wasn't alone anymore. There was a man next to her with a black mask on. He made no movements other than look into the camera like the girl. The girl's neck creaked to her side. It looked like it was causing her pain. And then the lights went out again. The chat resumed. This time, I screamed in fright and fell off my chair. There was another man with them now. He was standing next to the girl with the original one on the other side. This man had the same mask on, but his hands were grasping the girl's shoulders. Even with the subpar quality of the webcam, I could see the force with which the man dug his hands into the girl. It looked like he could rip her in two. The girl, however, had a huge grin on her face. Her eyes were mad with glee, or so it looked. Her teeth were perfectly lined up as her mouth spread into that toothy grin, but I could see she was in pain. Even with the smallest sign of her smile fading, the man clenched his hands even tighter than before, which made her
I'd start
smile
laughing
even
my
wider.
head up like,
All three of them were shaking, as if it was extremely cold where they were. After a couple seconds, I realized they were shuddering, like trying to hold back laughter. "What are you laughing at?" I yelled into the screen. They didn't answer, and continued to tremor with concealed hilarity. "What is so damn funny?" I bellowed. They stopped shaking. Within a couple seconds, the screen went black again. When it turned back on, the man no longer grasped the girl's shoulder. Neither was she smiling. All three pointed into the camera. Upon a closer look, I understood that they weren't pointing at me. They were pointing behind me. I didn't need to look back. I could see myself in the webcam. There was someone peeking from behind me. It was another man in a mask. And according to what I saw in my webcam, he was with me in my room, right behind me. I turned around quickly, but saw nothing where I had seen him in the webcam. I turned back towards the screen and, to my bewilderment, saw a third man in the girl's chat box. It was the same man I had just seen standing in my room. Now, all three had their hands on the girl and were gripping tight. The girl wasn't laughing anymore. She had a look of utter devastation. A tear was dropping from her eye. But it wasn't just a tear. It was blood trickling down her eye socket. She then mouthed the words, "Help me," and the next second she screamed as if her lungs were being ripped off as the screen went black. I immediately got up and pulled the plug out of my computer and backed out of the room. For a couple seconds, I swear I heard her screams, even though the computer was unplugged. The room went quiet, but I was too devastated to
You
stay
can see
there.
a llama
I ran
art
out of my
plushie
house
right
despite
there.
it being 3 a.m.
It was like right
I
in the
caught a cab
corner
and
up
went over to my
there.
friends.
You can
who
see
had
a
to talk me down for an
llama
hour
art
before I could be
plushie.
calmed. I returned back to my house with my friend a day later. Everything was the same. And after thoroughly checking around the house, we concluded that there was no one there. Nor was there a sign of anyone ever having broken in.
Why
Never
like
gone back
already
to the
check
deep
the
web.
cookies jar?
My friend suggested
He's like,
it might have
ooh,
been some
let me
prank
see
by
what's in
computer
there.
hackers, but the way that girl shrieked, the terror she had on her face, it convinced me she had been a victim herself. I'd wondered if I had stayed on for longer, if I would have become a victim too. Could those men have found me? Was there really someone in the room with me? There was nothing I could do, because there was nothing concrete to report to the police. What I did do was throw the computer out and buy a new one. There was no way I could even open it back up after what happened.
Mort. A college
It was an
horror
early
story.
morning. My campus didn't offer housing, and I lived about a half a mile from school, so I started my journey as usual while playing on my phone. I glanced up to see an old man heading towards me on a bicycle, with a fearful and confused expression. I was gathering up the... I felt chill. I stopped too, wondering if there was a man heading towards me on a bicycle. Normally, I'd step aside to let bikers and skaters pass, but he braked instead. I stopped too, wondering if there was something wrong. He walked up to me and said, "Don't worry, I'm not gonna hurt you." I felt chills instantly. I didn't know what to think. I just looked up at him with a fearful and confused expression. I was gathering up the courage to tell him that I was late for class and I should go, but before I could say anything, he said, "Get off the grass!" Looking down, I noticed I'd stepped over towards the road and onto the grass. I stepped off slowly, and he said, "You wouldn't want to step on any bugs or get your shoes dirty now, would you?" He raised his finger and asked me what my name was. I told him, and he replied, "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you." The same chills ran through my body again, but before I could say anything, the man said, "Get off the grass! You wouldn't want to step on any bugs or get your shoes dirty now, would you?" I looked down to see that I was back on the edge of the sidewalk again. This had to be deja vu. He asked for my name once more. I said my name again, but he interrupted me before I could finish. He told me his grandchildren are down the road and needed gas money. I told him I didn't have any spare change, or any change at all for that matter. He continued to ask me again, and I gave him the same answer. Eventually, I headed towards my school. I turned to see if he was still there, but he was gone. As I was walking, I approached the intersection. There was a truck on its side. It must have tipped over while turning the corner.
Holy shit, guys. That was weird.
It was a cold,
Guys.
foggy evening when I contacted a close friend of mine to
I
stay
need
at my
my-
place for the night.
I need my DJ
Both of
mask.
us were only 10 years old at the time, and my
Thank
parents
you.
were often at work until midnight, so I was usually alone with nothing to do except watching a television show or reading a book. My friend Alex had agreed to come over and brought a game of Monopoly to pass some of the time. I also asked if he was interested in going to explore an abandoned subway station 3 miles away. He seemed excited at first,
just
so
sold
we
our
planned
first
to go on
album.
the trip in the morning. I remembered that the subway dated back to the mid-1920s and became abandoned in 1932 after the market crash in 1929. I was very fascinated about its history, but never got the chance to go inside after my parents had warned me not to enter. As I quietly slept in my bed, I heard what sounded like a gunshot coming from the forest behind the house. Both of us woke up, frightened after what we had heard, and I told my friend not to worry.
That
as
wasn't
hunters
no
tend to go into the forest on
gunshot. That was your
frequent
friend with a
occasions, but
tap
when I
gun.
checked
Be
the
like,
time, it was 11:39 p.m. This seemed very
I used to
unusual,
love
as
tap
hunters only came into
guns.
the forest between
Tap
8
guns
p.m.
because
and
they'd
10
like
p.m.
smoke, and I'd be like,
I looked at
in
Alex
that
and
one
decided to get out
Deadpool
of my
movie,
bed,
like,
intending to look
I'd
through the
have a
window
mask
and
on and
spot
go.
for anyone in the forest. The darkness clouded my vision, so I was unable to see anyone in the forest. I turned around and looked at Alex again, when suddenly I heard the front door squeak open. Chills went down my spine. Both of us quietly moved to the bathroom, locked the door, and kept the light off. It was the only safe place in the house. Both of us were terrified as we desperately tried to keep as calm as we could. We heard footsteps getting louder and louder until they stopped in front of the bathroom door. And then this is when the most terrifying sound forced my heart to almost burst. Both of us screamed as the person chopped the door to pieces. It was pitch black inside the room, making it hard to find the vent, and by the time I spotted the vent, the person behind the door had made a hole big enough for us to see him. The man adorned black leather and was wearing a plague doctor mask. I scurried back to the vent, but it was too high above the floor for us to reach it, so Alex told me to go first because he was the strongest. He lifted me up on his shoulders, allowing me to open the vent and crawl inside. When I looked at the door again, the man had managed to fit his arm through the hole and reached for the lock. I quickly grabbed Alex's hand, but struggled to pull him up into the vent. "Alex!" I shouted, and began going after him. I pursued the figure until I was led to the abandoned subway deep within the forest. It was chilly and foggy, meaning that I could only see objects within a range of 5 or 6 yards. Inside the subway was a pool of freezing cold water. It was so dark that I couldn't see anything. I had to rely on listening to the screams from Alex and track the source. As I slowly walked through the subway, I was now struggling to breathe under the intense stress and fear of the situation. I called, but there was no response. I continued walking through the water until the exit was no longer visible. I was now experiencing a massive panic attack. I had lost track of Alex, and I had no idea where I was or how to get out. Where are you, Alex?
Are we quitters? Or are we one badass team? Oh, my phone's juicing up. If I could just get it to 30.
Guys, that's so crazy.
Back when I was in college, me and my best friend Miko heard a rumor that our dormitory was haunted. I didn't encounter anything in the 2 years of staying there, so I was skeptical. I could see why the rumor started. Our dorm was kind of creepy, and Miko was convinced it was true. One day, I placed a hot cup of coffee in the sink and said, "If this cup magically empties itself by the time we get back from school, I'll believe you." "Deal. Want to bet on it?" "Come on, you won't bet on it because you know you'll lose." When I arrived home, I noticed Miko was asleep. It seemed quite weird as he would normally be playing games or cooking in the kitchen. I put my bag on the table and noticed the cup in the sink. I knew it, I said to myself. I started to pour the coffee away when my phone vibrated. "Why are you calling me?" I thought perhaps he left his phone at school. I answered. "Hello?" "Hey, just eat without me tonight if you're hungry. I'm still at the store getting food supplies for next week. I grabbed some coffee. I noticed we're almost out. Oh, and I tried looking for that green sauce you put in your homemade burgers. No luck, though."
But, wait, another checkout just opened. I'll cook tonight. I shouldn't be too long. See ya.
I was confused. My eyes darted around the room as I tried to gather my thoughts. That's when I realized something. I was too freaked out at this point.
No. No. Hey, I hope you're hungry. Oh.
You lied to me, goddammit. You lied to me, goddammit. Oh, shit.
This happened in 2009. We would fly from our home state, California, to Minnesota to visit my father's family for the summer. I've always enjoyed it there because of the nature and peaceful atmosphere. My father's family lived far from the nearest town, and he only had 2 neighbors. My only friend there was a girl who lived next door. Let's call her Morgan. She's around my age, and me, my sister, and her would always play from sunrise to sunset. One day at around 4 p.m., we were outside playing badminton. My sister hit the birdie too hard, and it landed in the next-door neighbor's yard. Morgan said she had more inside her house and went to get them. I felt uncomfortable leaving it there, so I told my sister I'll go get it myself. She told me not to do it, just wait for Morgan. While my sister was fixing the net, I decided to run and get it real quick. As I was about to enter the gate, my sister grabbed me from behind and began telling me how much of a bad idea it was. That's when an old man came out from behind the house. He picked up the birdie and said, "Is this yours?" I said yes and asked if I could have it back. He said he had his grandchildren's old toys upstairs and asked if we wanted to have them. Me and my sister were very young at the time, and we thought as he lived so close and he looked like a typical sweet grandfather, that's the worst that could happen. So we agreed and entered through the back door. The first thing I noticed was the stench. It smelled of damp and rotting food. I shrugged it off at the time since he was old. Maybe he lived alone. We heard Morgan calling our names, and we politely told the old man that we had to go. Maybe we'd return tomorrow. Morgan saw us through the window and immediately asked what we were doing there. I answered, "The sweet old man," and she cut me off and said that the house was abandoned since she moved there. I thought she was just playing around with me and told her to cut it out. She had a blank expression, and that's when I knew that she was serious. We never told anyone because we didn't want to cause any trouble. But now that I'm older, I wonder if it was some ghost or creepy old man luring kids into that house. The house got demolished recently, which is why I wanted to share this story.
Whether you love to cook to make people happy, or to travel the world experiencing other cultures, the Navy has a place for you.
Story.
The bridge.
So this story takes place when I was about 16 years old. At my school, I played for the volleyball team, and every year we would go to a camp and do volunteer work for this guy. The camp was in the middle of nowhere. When we got to the camp, we immediately started to work until 8 p.m. This was around October, so it was already dark at 8. My 2 friends and I were sitting around the fire, trying to figure out something we could do so we weren't so bored. We heard that there was a small river down the hill from the camp, and we
You
thought we
shouldn't
could
have
check it out.
protect me.
The problem is that it was some guy's property, and the owner of the camp told us to not disturb him since the guy was a little strange. We weren't really supposed to leave the camp, but being 16 years old, we loved breaking the rules.
Tell me if you guys can see him.
We walked about 10 minutes from the camp and finally reached the river. It was bigger than we expected. and there was a large wooden bridge that crossed it.
Okay.
The bridge was about 20 feet long and was big enough to let a truck go over.
Buddy, what's wrong?
My two friends and I decided to go under the bridge
I'm
and check
sorry,
it out.
Grandma.
As we were walking by the shoreline,
I'm
we saw two
sorry.
headlights off in the distance moving towards the bridge, so we bolted underneath it and hid. We then heard the truck
This
roll over
video
our
is gonna be
heads
pretty
to the
long,
other side.
guys. So
My friends and I chilled there for a while.
better
just
grab your
walking and throwing
popcorn,
rocks in the water.
get your
It was about
blanket,
8:30 at this time, and now it was pretty
and we
much
be
pitch
Gucci.
black. That's when we started to hear a slow rumble in the distance. The same truck had come back, and this time it was moving much slower. We stayed put under the bridge, stifling our laughter. Eventually, the truck moved over the bridge, but rather than going over to the other side, the truck stopped right on top of us. The only thing you could hear was the rushing water and the hum of the engine. Then, the door of the truck swung open, and out came a loud thump on top of the bridge. Then we heard a loud scream saying, "I know you're out there! I'm gonna find you!" I looked at my friends, and they were both shaking in fear. This must have been the crazy property owner, and he seemed pissed that we were on his land. He started screaming and saying he was gonna hurt us if he finds us. We could see that he had a flashlight, and he was swinging it around looking for us. We heard loud thumps as he walked around a little bit, calling out for us, and thank God he never went under the bridge. Eventually, it went silent, and it sounded as if he went back into his truck. I was too terrified to move. We sat there for about 10 minutes, and then my one friend, who we'll call Trevor, whispered in my ear, saying that we have to go. I gave him a quick nod, and in slow motion, we moved out from under the bridge. We started to army crawl on the shoreline of the river, and I remember looking behind me to see the top of the bridge.
Because I won't let him on the couch.
We sat there for about 10 minutes, and then my one friend,
He
who
wants
we'll
his
call
new
Trevor,
bed.
whispered in my ear, saying that we have to go. I gave him a quick nod, and in slow motion, we moved out from under the bridge. We started to army crawl on the shoreline of the river, and I remember looking behind me to see the top of the bridge. I saw a white Ford F-150. The driver's seat was the man, staring right at me with a
I'm
sinister
making a
smile.
YouTube video right now.
Gave me a little wave. At that moment, I screamed and ran. My friends saw me run and took off after me. I could hear screaming from behind us. I took a quick glance behind me and saw that he was chasing after us, and I couldn't quite make out the object in his hand, but it seemed to be a weapon of some sort. We ran into the forest and ducked behind a bush. It was pitch black in the forest, and we couldn't hear a thing. We sat there for a while, just shaking. The man never walked by us, and we never heard him. After we gathered our courage, we got up and walked back to camp, got into our tents, and tried to fall asleep. The next morning, we talked to the camp owner about the man that owned the property of the river. The camp owner said that he didn't know much about the man, but he knows that he has some mental problems and he'd been accused of assault. I am so happy that we were able to escape from underneath the bridge. I can't imagine what would have happened if he caught us.
She's up at Tommy's. Then I have no idea, because she's crazy. Sorry for calling your daughter crazy, but she is. When he gets back, I will move most of this, and we can place his bed right here.
So what do you do when you can't sleep?
I call into your live streams. No, but really, I only get sleepy.
My name is Josh Roberts, and it's been a year since I was abducted. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was walking home from school. It was about 6 p.m. and there was a full moon and a chill in the air. I stepped off the bus, and for the first time, someone else got off with me. I'd never seen this new kid at school before. I could hear footsteps footsteps behind me. I took a quick glance and saw the kid walking at a brisk pace. I thought he was following me, so I took a left, which wasn't my usual route. I looked around again.
Dang,
and saw him
guys, I
take the
think
same
we already
left.
seen
My
this
heart started
one.
pumping and my legs started shaking at the sound of the footsteps as they got louder.
This was the
faster.
first one.
I then panicked and started running. I remembered a shortcut in the nearby forest to my neighborhood, so I ran as fast as my legs could carry me.
Yeah, my grandma
Hey,
just
kid,
took out
wait
my
up,
dog.
said a heavy voice from
We
behind me.
took him out
Tried my
all
hardest
around
not to
town
stumble on the
today.
logs and boulders in my path.
All day,
I could hear the
so...
sound of sticks and leaves.
Yeah,
being
this was
broken
the
by some
first one
fast,
that we
heavy
watched.
footsteps. My legs started throbbing as the adrenaline wore off, so I took a detour towards a playground. I stopped to catch my breath, looking around for somewhere to hide. Then went silent. I was doubtful that I lost him. I took my phone out to call the police when I spotted a local news article.
Okay,
Caution,
guys.
there is a suspicious man on the
We
loose.
are gonna
He escaped the local
change the
prison
video
and
that we're
assaulted an
watching.
officer. Beware, he may look like a teen, but he is in his 20s. If you see him, call.
Want to hear something scary?
I'm Sapphire. Want to hear something scary?
I love that sound.
In 1970, a young woman named Donna was turning 28, and for her birthday, her mother gave her a seemingly harmless Raggedy Ann doll that she purchased from a secondhand store. Both Donna and her roommate Angie were nurses,
I remember
and so they were out
those
of the house most of the time, leaving
I
the
used
doll
to
in the
scream
apartment
when I
alone.
seen those.
They didn't think much of their new roommate until strange things started happening. One night, after a long shift, Donna came home to find the doll sitting on her bed in her closed bedroom, which would have been perfectly fine if that's where Donna had left her. Other nights, Donna would find the doll sitting on the couch with her legs crossed and arms folded, or standing upright in the kitchen. Both Donna and Angie were rational young women and believed there had to be a reasonable explanation for this. Maybe they were just remembering things wrong. But Lou, Angie's fiance, thought otherwise. He did not trust that doll one bit and wanted them to get rid of it, or at least consult a medium to see if there truly
Duke,
was
are you being
something
bad with Grandma?
But Donna and Angie didn't.
You
believe
being
that was
bad like grandmother,
so they
Duke?
carried on as usual. Then they began
Was
finding
there saying if he was
handwritten
being
notes around
bad?
the house. They were written in pencil in childlike handwriting on pieces of parchment, a type of paper that no one in the house owned. They read, One night, Donna came home and found a mysterious red liquid on the doll's hands and chest. It looked like blood, but it was coming from the doll itself. That was the push that Donna and Angie needed to come to terms with the fact that there was something wrong with this doll. They brought in a medium and performed a seance. A long time ago, the medium said, before this apartment complex was built, there was a field on this property, and it was here that the body of 7-year-old Annabelle Higgins was found, and it is in this doll that her spirit now lives. She trusts you and just wants to be around you. Donna and Angie felt sorry for Annabelle and decided to let her stay in the apartment with them. Lou was not happy about that. One night, it was just Lou and Angie in the apartment, packing up for a road trip they were leaving on in the morning. Lou was walking to the kitchen and past Donna's room and heard shuffling coming from inside. Donna wasn't home, so who could it be? Lou threw the door open. There was nobody there. Nobody human, at least. He walked inside and saw Annabelle, sitting in the corner of the room. As he walked towards her, he got the burning feeling as though someone were standing behind him. He whipped around to find nobody. He turned back to Annabelle and felt burning again, but this time on his chest. He lifted his shirt to find 7 distinct scratch marks singed into his skin. The following morning, they called a priest, who then called Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned demonologists. This doll is not possessed, Lorraine told Donna. Demons only possess humans. This is using this doll to manipulate you, moving it around the house so you would pay attention to it, then tricking a medium into telling you that it was the spirit of a harmless young girl. So, what does it want? Your soul. A priest performed an exorcism on the apartment, and the Warrens took Annabelle home with them in a bag. Knowing what this entity was capable of, they made sure to avoid the highways on their way home, since Annabelle would no doubt try to sabotage their drive. And they were right. Along the way, the car's engine continuously stalled. So, is Annabelle truly dangerous? Or is all of this an elaborate hoax? If you're the type who needs to see to believe, you can actually visit Annabelle at the Occult Museum, a section of the Warrens' Connecticut home where they store haunted relics, collected from the many cases they worked on. She's kept locked in a box with multiple warnings. One skeptical visitor made the fatal mistake of mocking the doll, tapping her glass case and daring her to do her worst on him. When he left for home, he got into a terrible motorcycle accident and died 3 hours later. Whether or not the Warrens created that story as a cautionary tale, would you really want to test it?
How many of these blocky
Layla
things
had always
are
been
there?
somewhat of an outcast at
What
school.
the hell?
Because of her thin frame and gaunt features, kids were afraid of her. But there were 4 girls in particular who loved to pick on her: Christina, Emma, Jessica, and Jasmine. They would call her Demon Girl. Freak. She looks like a witch. Careful, she might put a spell on you. When Layla told a teacher about this, the girls cornered her during lunch period and beat her up. Layla and her family had just moved to a new house. Unfortunately, it wasn't far enough for Layla to switch schools. But the move did excite her, because there was a creepy graveyard nearby, and rumor had it that there was a black wooden hut where a witch lived. So one night, she decided to visit the hut alone. Led by nothing more than the light from her cell phone, she walked down the rocky path in the graveyard and stood before the small, cobweb-covered hut. There were no lights or sounds coming from inside. Layla reached for the door and pushed it open. Everything was covered in spider webs and dust. It looked like no one had stepped foot in there for decades. Layla walked around inside the small dark shack in fascination, but couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't completely alone. Then something caught her eye. On the table was a pocket watch. It was the only thing in the shack that wasn't completely covered in dust. It didn't look like it worked anymore, though. It only had one hand, which pointed at 12. Still, Layla thought it was beautiful and interesting, so she put it in her pocket and went back home. The next morning, Layla got ready for school like every other day. But when she went downstairs to eat breakfast, her mom shot her a confused look. "Did you dye your hair?" "No." "Well, something's different." Layla ignored her mom's comment and ate her breakfast. When she went to the bathroom after her meal, she caught her reflection. Her mom was right. Her hair was darker. Her hair used to be a light brown, but now it was almost black. And over the next month, her hair got even darker and her skin even paler. Her eyes were almost black as well. And then came the shadow. Every now and then in the corner of her eye, Layla would see someone watching her, but when she turned to look at it, it would be gone. And every night she would dream that she was watching herself sleep, like she was watching from someone else's point of view. One day at school, Layla was trying to get to her classroom without one of her bullies noticing, but failed. Christina headed straight for her and immediately began throwing rude words in her face and shoving her. As Christina walked away to her next class, Layla muttered under her breath, "I wish you would be out of my life forever." She pulled out the pocket watch and rubbed the engravings. Looking at the watch always made her feel calmer. Layla was both relieved and surprised when none of the girls came near her the rest of the day. The next day, Christina didn't show up to school. Rumor had it that her parents had last minute decided to move back to Shanghai. What an amazing coincidence, Layla thought. She pulled out her pocket watch and noticed something odd. The cover was flipped open, and the hand was now pointing at 1. The next day, Jessica was in a terrible car crash on her way to school and ended up in a coma. Then Jasmine had gone missing. These girls had always given Layla trouble, but she never wished this on them. She threw the pocket watch in the trash, but it just reappeared in her pocket. Eventually, anyone who had ever given Layla a hard time had something unpleasant happen to them. The hands now pointed at 11. You're a demon, Layla. I don't know what you're doing, but it needs to stop. Do you understand? I have put up with you and your awful friends for years, and you dare to ask mercy of me? I wish you were dead. The next day, Emma was found in the woods near her home. She was devoured by a pack of wolves. When Layla heard the news, she knew things had gone way too far. She had to destroy that pocket watch. That night, she went back to the graveyard near her house, to the hut. She threw the watch back on the table and ran back home. And the very next day, Jessica awoke from her coma. Jasmine had been found and reunited with her family. Even Layla's hair and skin were returning to their original colors. The curse was broken, and things were back the way they were. Well, maybe not quite. Everyone at school was talking about how Layla somehow put a curse on those who wronged her, and no one dared mess with her again. When Brooklyn was about 3 years old, she was diagnosed with a very serious heart problem. The doctors were always in a panic, horrified that her death would come any day. Brooklyn would constantly overhear nurses talking about how worried they were about a little girl. She thought that they might have been talking about her, but Brooklyn's mom calmed her down and reminded her that there were lots of patients in the hospital. Though it didn't help that whenever her nurse came into her room, her eyes were red and wet, like she had just been crying. It always made Brooklyn nervous. What was wrong? The night before Brooklyn was to undergo surgery, she asked her nurse, "You're always crying when you come in my room. Why?" The nurse froze. She slowly bent down and whispered in her ear, "You will understand when you see her." At the time, Brooklyn didn't know what that meant. The surgery was a success, and Brooklyn now had a new heart. Being a young girl, she couldn't quite yet grasp the gravity of what she had gone through. It didn't even cross her mind to wonder where this new heart had come from. She was just happy to be alive and well. Before she left the hospital, her nurse gave her a small stuffed bear and told her to take good care of it. Years had passed, and Brooklyn was now about 8 years old. She loved to draw and would sketch cute and happy characters like Winnie the Pooh and Dora the Explorer. But one day, while she was drawing, she heard a voice. It wasn't malevolent or scary, but rather calm and peaceful. It makes me happy when you make art. It was faint, but Brooklyn knew that the voice was coming from the bear. She knew how crazy it sounded, but there was no doubt in her mind that there was a spirit living inside of it that wanted to be her friend. Her name was Rosalita, and she would talk to Brooklyn all the time, and Brooklyn would talk back. The problem was that no one else could hear Rosalita. Brooklyn's parents became concerned that their daughter was always locking herself in her room and talking to herself. But Brooklyn didn't care. Rosalita had become her friend. Brooklyn continued to draw pictures for her to make her happy. And Brooklyn believed that Rosalita helped her become a better artist. Rosalita would guide Brooklyn's hand on the paper. It was like she was a part of her. But Rosalita became tired of the childish drawings. "You need to make real art," she said. She told Brooklyn to walk outside into the yard where she found the bones of a dead mouse. "Turn it into art," Rosalita said. "Bring meaning to its death." So Brooklyn took the bones and glued them on a piece of paper, with Rosalita instructing her each step of the way. She hung it on her wall, and to this day, it's still there. It always made her parents uncomfortable, so they would always try and take it down. But whenever they would take it down, they would get sick the next day, and Brooklyn would hang it back up. Did Rosalita have something to do with that? For the most part, Rosalita was always sweet and kind, but there was something odd that happened a few times that concerned Brooklyn. When their first family dog died suddenly, Brooklyn was heartbroken. Rosalita, however, was the opposite. "Now we can spend more time together." And in the span of a few weeks, her other family members' dogs unexplainably passed away. Did Rosalita have anything to do with that? Brooklyn is now 19 years old and still speaks to the stuffed bear that hosts Rosalita's spirit. Do you remember the nurse who gave this bear to you? Yes, I do. She was my mom. She was always crying because I wasn't doing well. I was staying in the same hospital as you. Did anyone ever tell you where your new heart came from? No. You are my art. Your life brought meaning to my death. Brooklyn began to cry. Thank you so much. You're so important to me. But, Rosalita continued, on your 21st birthday, I have to go. What do you mean? I have to move on. Oh, why? Rosalita paused. I just have to go. And I'm bringing my heart with me. Does that mean that I'll... Rosalita didn't say another word and wouldn't answer Brooklyn whenever she brought it up again. What did Rosalita mean by that? Guess she'll find out in 2 years.
Oh yeah, this game's great. You get to play the police officer.
I'm sorry.
Tickets. Look at this guy. Parking in the no parking zone.
Kind of scared
All
of that.
crooked all over the curb. Who gave this guy a license? Alright, I'm gonna have to write you a ticket. Serve you right. I'm an officer of the law. You have been served. Don't be giving me no attitude. Oh, is there any way to fix this? Shut up. You ain't talking your way out of this one, buddy. Now put your hands on the car. Police officer.
When Tanya sent this story to me, the power went out in her house. But that didn't surprise her. Whenever she tells people of this experience, strange things tend to happen. Hopefully nothing will while I share her story. 2 years ago, Lee, Tanya's now husband and then boyfriend, was a frequent house sitter for a very nice but slightly off family. They owned their own business and were out of town frequently for work. Their house was very minimalistic, aside from a few rather outlandish decorations, like a giant red ram statue and a set of antlers wrapped in rope. Before leaving the house to Lee, they would always remind him to never go in their son's room. One day, when he was house sitting, he found a peculiar mask on the countertop. It was a white goat skeleton head with sharp teeth and an upside-down pentagram on its head. It made him feel uneasy, so he told Tanya about it that night. But she told him it was probably just a Halloween costume, since it was October. Another time when Lee was house sitting, Tanya and their corgi joined him. Lee went to the gym, leaving Tanya and the dog to play in the house on their own. Tanya threw a ball, but it stopped midair and dropped suddenly. Tanya was stunned. She threw the ball again, and it stopped in the same spot. Her dog began growling and wouldn't stop until Lee came back home. A few nights later, while Tanya was sleeping alone in her apartment, she suddenly found herself inside that house. There was a man in a white suit, casually leaning against the wall. He was incredibly handsome, but frightening at the same time, a dark aura surrounding his charming and intoxicating smile. Tanya had never seen this man before, but knew exactly who he was. But how? How was she seeing something that she didn't even believe in?
I've been waiting for you. You're going to join me, aren't you?
No, never. He cocked his head back in laughter, and suddenly they were in her parents' bedroom. Tanya started screaming, trying anything to get her parents' attention.
They can't help you. No one can.
Now they were in front of her sleeping boyfriend. Tanya tried in vain again to get him to wake up, but he couldn't hear her. Then her cat slinked toward the man, hissing and baring its teeth. It was protecting her. Tanya woke up. She was back in her bedroom, gasping for air. She immediately called Lee to come over. Together, they drove to her parents' house because Tanya did not want to stay in her apartment. When her parents answered the door, Tanya's eyes widened. They were wearing the exact same clothes that they were wearing in her dream. She told them about what had just happened, and her parents exchanged a worried look. It was only a matter of time, her mom said. Everyone in our family at some point has had the same dream. It's the devil testing our faith. and he is now after you. You're the only agnostic in our family and the only non-confirmed Catholic, and he probably thinks you're an easy target. Tanya, don't let him in. The next day, they called a priest who blessed her apartment. And while Tanya hasn't had another visit from the man in the white suit since, she still feels like something evil is still following her. Her blanket would be yanked off of her while she slept at night, and her healthy corgi and cat had both died shortly after, of unknown causes. Tanya used to think her family was just trying to scare her with their stories about demons. And while this experience hasn't convinced her to be baptized, it definitely changed.
Dude, not
So
this
today I
ugly
tried out a
bloody
new
ass
app
bitch.
called Pop Jam, and it was really good. It's basically Instagram for like young kids like me. So basically you can take whatever pictures you want and you can post them and people can comment and you can add hashtags and it's super fun. My name is LlamaGirl788 and yeah, go check me out and go check out the app. It's super fun and I highly recommend it.
Changed her. When Orchid was 6 years old, her dad went on vacation to Minnesota to visit some relatives. When he returned, he brought back many gifts, among other things. Her family had a small chicken farm where they raised the birds for meals. Orchid was used to seeing her parents bring a chicken inside when it was time to eat. But the day her dad came back from his trip, there was a strange black bird on his arm. All of their chickens were white, so Orchid was puzzled. This bird looked like a crow. It was all black, including its beak, except its eyes were red. Her dad and the bird disappeared into the kitchen.
Mommy, what's that bird Daddy was carrying?
What are you talking about?
Daddy was holding a black bird.
Her mom went into the kitchen to see what she was talking about, but all she saw was her dad. There was no black bird in sight. That night, Orchid slept in her parents' bedroom. For whatever reason, she woke up in the middle of the night and sat up. She noticed something behind the curtains in front of the window. It was a girl who looked like she was about 12 years old. She was just standing there, staring at Orchid, with her hollow black eyes. Orchid stared back at her, wondering what she was going to do. But she just stood there. Eventually, Orchid fell back asleep. The next morning, Orchid was drawing a picture. What a pretty girl. Who is that? Her mom asked.
This is Princess.
Her mom thought nothing of her daughter's cute drawing, until she started seeing it everywhere. Pages and pages of drawings of Princess all over the house. She was even on the walls and the bedroom pillows. Orchid, you can't be drawing on everything.
But Princess is my friend. I like when she's around.
Her family was pretty disturbed by Orchid's sudden new obsession. But weeks later, her mother realized that there had to be a connection to Princess and the black bird. Orchid's family was practitioners of Hmong shamanism. Whenever you go on a trip, you must ask the spirits to not come back home with you, and Orchid's father had forgotten to do so. They suspected that Princess was a lost soul who attached herself to Orchid's father. They decided to perform Uane, a shamanic ritual to heal those battling with the spirit. Because if Orchid continued to spend time with Princess, there was a good chance she could be dragged into the spirit world forever. Orchid was placed in front of the altar, and a shaman healer rang bells and chanted around her to enter the spirit realm. Once the shaman made the journey into the other world, he was able to interact and communicate with the spirit of Princess. After the ritual, the shaman healer asked Orchid, "Where is Princess now?" Orchid said nothing and started tearing up. "What's the matter?"
I don't want to talk about Princess.
"Why not?"
She says she can't play with me anymore because she's dead.
Okay, guys, this is gonna be the end of the video. Yeah. Like and subscribe to my channel. Don't watch this video at night like I am.